Hey everyone, welcome back to the Distinct Mastering YouTube channel. My name is Freddie. Today we're going to be doing a video by special request, and this one is about carving space. If you struggle with carving space in your mixes and just don't know what to do, then this video is for you. I have to admit, I had a hard time coming up with some concepts for this at first. When I was asked to do this, one of the biggest things is listening, and I will explain that as we get into the video. But first, if you enjoy my channel, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and that bell notification will keep you up to date on future videos. This is going to be a good one, so let's get into it. All right, here we are. I've got an Ableton session loaded up that I'm working on. This is just getting done with the mixing. You might have heard this beginning if you watched my pink noise video. I had just kind of started the track and asked if I should finish it. Well, it's been a few days and I finished it pretty much. It needs to be mastered, but I'm going to sit on it for a while and see how it goes. So I'll go ahead and play you a little of this real quick so you can catch the vibe. Alright, so you get the idea. The track's a lot more built out than it was in that last video that you saw, and things are sounding a lot more balanced. Obviously, it's not mastered like I said, so you know, it still needs a little more clarity and various things, but the mix overall is very well put together. I might do some minor touch-ups later down the road as I give it a break, but let's get into talking about carving space. So the first thing that I recommend when considering about carving space is you need to be able to listen and hear for things that aren't sounding right, especially when you bring in samples from, say, Splice or Loop Cloud or various sample packs. I find that a lot of these samples sometimes can have some resonating issues that the untrained ear may not be able to notice. And that is very key when trying to make samples fit into your mix, fixing those problems, and then also carving creative space to let other things sit well in the mix. We're going to kind of go over some of this as we get into this video. I'm going to show you some different tactics. I'm even going to I pulled in a splice vocal that I'm not using for the track, but just to show you what I mean. So key point, listening is crucial. So training your ears, getting good at that, having good room acoustics, all of that jazz that we speak about all the time on this channel is super crucial when it comes down to this stuff. Okay, the next thing is, you know, surgical EQ. If you're bringing in samples and things that aren't going to fit the track, that's going to be a problem. So your job is to obviously try to make them fit as best as you can. Not only does it involve volume, which I suggest you check out my video on K-metering. I'll leave you a link to that. But that also includes EQ and tonal balance. Now, let's take this. I have this one in yellow here. I'm just going to loop this breakdown, and I'm going to unmute this. This is not a sound that I'm going to use in this track, but I brought it in just to use. And it's funny because I've actually heard this in a song before that I've played as a DJ. So, Splice, man, common vocals all the time. But let me just play this vocal, and let me unmute this EQ. It's a cool vocal, but it's got this, you know, it's a cashmere vocal. His samples are really good, but it's got this harshness to it. Now, that might fit for some tracks, but for this track, that doesn't fit. And so what I went ahead and did is I did some surgical moves here to show you guys the difference. Let's turn these off and turn these on so we can kind of go one by one. The first one that I caught was this one at 9,300 hertz, 9,356 hertz. Say what you say. And it's very minute, but that little thing right there can go a long way. It's just this high-pitched piercing that can cut through tracks or interfere with your hi-hats. And
what you say, you feel some type of way.
now this is not always going to be in the same spot. You can't just rely on me and say, oh, at 9300 hertz, every sample I bring in, I'm going to cut. That's not how this works. You really need to know how to find these with your ears. The next one that, now, I mean, you can try to use these, before I get into the next one, you could try to use the visualizer or some of the tools in the FabFilter Pro Q3 or other EQs, but, I mean, nothing's going to beat the ears. And when you're making these moves, I suggest you can do it in solo mode to try to find some surgical problems, but I always suggest to mix with in reference to the rest of your track. So turn solo off and make sure what you're doing is working right. Now, let's get into the next one. So the next one that I found was this. I actually went to 481 hertz. This frequency right here, it's just kind of muddying up the mix a little. Let me turn it off. It's got that hollow tone to it. Right there, just, I mean, that's a pretty big notch. That, you know, these are big notches. But I'm doing the big notches for demonstration of the video. And in mixing, it's okay to do big notches like this. In mastering, I would never, ever do huge notches like this. We need to be transparent when mastering. That's why you want to address these problems in your mix. It's very important to address these in the mix. Now, the next one that I'd found was this one at 1321.9 hertz. And this is kind of small. It's just a little ringing. You might widen this. If you do widen it, I would bring it up. Let's see how we're doing. Before, after. And then we have this one right here at 2963.8 hertz. Now this one is just this little kind of sleigh bellish sound almost. If you just listen to it like that, it's almost like a filtered sleigh bell. When you're in the face, nowhere to be found. Say what you say. It's very, very subtle, but to me it helps. I'm going to play you this in context with the track. And remember, I'm not using this in the track. I just put this in. So this is before. And see, because I'm able to do that, I could even gain it up a little bit now to kind of match what it was doing before. So this is before and after with the gain. So that just gives me a nice place to work with that vocal. Now I can do some enhancements. Now I can do some saturation. Now I can do whatever I want to do to it. But I've created a baseline for myself, and I fixed some problems and got that thing to sit nicely in the mix without any processing. Notice, I didn't do any boosting. I just did cuts. So I'm going to go ahead and mute this because it's not part of my track. And we'll get into the next one. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is musical EQ. And examples of musical EQs would be like wide strokes, broad strokes, using tools like PULTECs or EQs that are just very, very musical in their approach. They're not surgical, but when you make moves, they're usually wide, they're broad. And these types of EQs are great for adding color and also just musical moves to your EQs. So they're not going to be your typical standard Pro Q3 or the Ableton stock EQ, but you can do musical moves with the Ableton stock EQ, and that's why I'm showing you right here. So I have an Ableton EQ here with a huge shelf and some other moves, and then I got these two PULTECs. They're not on right now, but I want to show you some musical moves that you could potentially do. Let's go to the beginning of the track and loop this up. Actually, let's go right here to this section and play this part. So first and foremost, I want to mute this EQ. This is the bass I programmed, and what it is let's bring this over here. It's a simple bass line. It's just a sawtooth wave on oscillator A at -1. The sub is on, it's at 0 octave, and then you've got another sawtooth at 0 with a envelope on the cutoff giving you the sound that sounds like this. So very basic patch that I programmed for this. But as you can see, let's bring in the kick. And you see I'm automating that a little bit too for just variation. Now if I take this off, it sounds fine both ways, but in context with the mix, if I turn this EQ off, you hear a little bit more muddiness up top, right? That's because it's almost conflicting with the keys and everything up there. So my concept was to give this space. Really, when you're carving, you're trying to create space for elements in the mix. If this sound is got the same frequency space as this sound, you're going to need to try to find a way to balance those two together, and that's what carving space is all about. Here's another thing that I did for this video is I went ahead and did a boost with this PULTEC, the common PULTEC punch trick, which if you missed my video on the PULTEC punch, leave you a link, go check that out. So this is giving the bass a little boost at 100 Hertz as well as a cut. And if we want to look at what that looks like, that's why I put this here. Let's go ahead and turn this off. So you can see right here that it dipped down. So this would be an example of a musical move. I'm adding color here, but I'm also cutting all that out of there. Look at, all this just came up. If I bring this back in, you see it fall. And that's giving me space for these other elements in the mix. Especially later in the track when you hear a lot more. Let's see what I did with this PULTEC. These are more for examples in the video. So I did the same 100 Hertz boost here. And what I did is I dipped it 300. So let's see what this one sounds like. I like that. So this one definitely gives it some healthy help. Like this one sounds a little meatier, but this one sounds cleaner in the mix. The 300 cut really helped, and then the 100 boost it's just making this musical curve. And check out my video on the PULTEC punch, you'll see what I mean. So musical EQ and musical curves can really enhance your mix and carve space if you're very creative. Let's take a look at another one. All right, so here on these keys, I've got this dip right about 681 Hertz. Let's turn it off. And it's subtle, you know, it's only being cut 5 dB. I mean, that's kind of a lot, not a huge amount, but it just puts everything in the mix. This before and after. So there's another example of kind of a more musical move. It's a very broad EQ move. It's not a surgical move at all. And it just almost enhanced the sides of that sound. If you listen to it carefully, it just kind of melted it into the track with just that one move. So that's an example. You know, like I said, you can't use these frequencies and these pinpoints for every sound in your mix. You need to use your ears, listen, and find these spots. Another thing I want to do is I want to show you what I did here with these deep strikes. Let's play this section. And I'm just going to play the kick, the bass, and this sound. we'll notice that there's a bit of a musical move here and a surgical move. And the thing is, if I turn these off, it's filtering up, so let me go to there we go. So it works, but if I make this move right here, it just helps clean it up. And this helps bring it out. And I killed all the low end so it didn't interfere with the bass line. There's also some EQ in this Saturn, essentially. So that's a combination of musical and surgical, just to kind of show you an example of what you can do with some of this stuff. Now, another thing I would suggest is if you're doing a lot of layering, I would suggest trying to carve space between the layers because that can build up. For example, if you're laying a bunch of claps, you might want to check the mid-range, you know, try to carve space so each of them can sit with each other. If you're layering a lot of synths, I would suggest the same thing. If you're layering basses, make sure there's a clear distinction between your sub and your top. So kind of roll off some of that low end on the top to make room for that sub. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with a huge muddy mess. I would say the same thing for kicks. If you're doing like a kick drum and a top kick, be conscious of this stuff, because if you just keep stacking sounds and you're not aware of these frequency buildups, that's what's going to cause problems in your mix. And so I hope this video was helpful on carving space in your mixes. If you have any questions, please shoot me a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and the bell notification will keep you up to date. My name is Freddie from Distinct Mastering, and have a great day.